Like they said, I work for a conservation non-profit called Wildlife Sos, and I work as the elephant campaign manager. This is a slightly difficult job to describe, but I can tell you that it involves a lot of dealing with the government, a lot of paperwork, and I get to meet some really cool elephants. As of April last year, it also involved a 2,100-kilometer journey across 6 states over the course of 5 days in a big green truck with a fantastic team and an even more fantastic elephant in the back. This is her story and the story of that adventure. But before I get started on the story, I'm going to give you a little prologue about Wildlife SOS. Wildlife SOS was started in the year 1995 by two people, Karthik and Geeta, who are extremely different as individuals but had one common goal: to conserve India's natural heritage. And the animal that they decided was going to be the mascot, and their first project was this one. This is a sloth bear. I don't know a lot of people who have seen a sloth bear, and I don't know a lot of people who even know what it is. But for all of you, sloth bears are actually the most commonly found bear in the country. And unlike the bears that we usually hear about, they're small, they're shy, and they're awkward, a little like myself. And for many, many years, sloth bears were poached from the wild as cubs and sold into a performing tradition known as dancing bears. That's what a dancing bear looks like. And the community that relied on these bears was known as the Kalandar community. They're a nomadic Muslim community that for 400 centuries had relied on these bears to earn their livelihood. And the fate of the Kalandar community was so intrinsically linked with the fate of the bears that the Wildlife SOS team realized that in order to rescue the dancing bears of India, they had to rescue the Kalandar community as well. And hence, we started providing seed funds and new jobs for the men, empowering the women through skill training, and educating over 1,500 Kalandar children to ensure that they no longer had to rely on the abuse of an animal to earn a living. And so the Kalandar community could live their lives with dignity. And the bears could just be bears again at any one of our rescue centers across India, of which the Agra Bear Rescue Facility is in fact the largest bear rescue facility in the world. And so by 2009, Wildlife SOS had rescued every single dancing bear off the streets of the country, thereby ending a 400-year-old abusive trade. While rescuing the dancing bears of India, the team noticed something else. There was another wild animal on the streets of the country. You'd see them, in temples, you'd see them in processions, you'd see them begging on the streets. But you'd sort of gotten immune to the fact that although they belonged in the wild, they seemed to be out there in captivity. We're talking about elephants. See, we're all taught as children that elephants belong in the wild. But there's some sort of willful ignorance when we see them wandering around on our roads or in circuses. And this willful ignorance seems to have spread on to our legal system as well, which is why when our country made its laws and acts to protect wildlife, some of, by the way, the most progressive wildlife protection laws in the world, we forgot that elephants were wild animals too. Because the same laws that are used to protect lions and tigers and bears and frogs from private ownership, from performing, somehow didn't extend to elephants. Which is why elephants got left behind. And Wildlife SOS initiated its elephant rescue program to rescue India's captive elephants from their lives of abuse as well. And we started the Elephant Conservation and Care Center in Mathura, where we rescue elephants like Bhola. And change his life. And this is the story of one of those elephants. It starts in Sandavasal in Tamil Nadu, 2,100 kilometers from our rescue center. It's the story of a 53-year-old circus elephant named, as poetic justice would have it, Rhea. And this is the first time I saw her. She's standing in exactly the same spot that she's been standing in since the circus that owned her abandoned her, following repeated attempts to sell her to a temple after their license to use her as a performing elephant was cancelled. Our story begins here, but her story began 53 years ago when she was just a calf. Like most of India's captive elephants, she would have been poached from the wild as a calf, snatched from her family and her herd, and then sold into a lifetime of slavery. I say slavery because the indoctrination process of a captive elephant in India or anywhere in the world is rife with cruelty and abuse. In particular, the indoctrination and training processes of circus elephants involve what is called negative reinforcement, beatings and starvation. For what? So that they'll perform inane tricks for a circus audience that is in fact wholly ignorant to their plight. Tricks like hitting a ball with a bat or sitting on a stool. Keeping all of this in mind, we expected some hostility or at least a little mistrust from Rhea, which is why we were pleasantly surprised when her first reaction to us was to reach out her trunk as if making polite acquaintance. Of course, it helped that we'd carried bananas as a bribe. So when the Wildlife SOS veterinarian got to work checking Rhea, taking a look at every single scar on her body, and in particular her feet, which, by the way, if you've ever looked at the feet of a circus elephant or any elephant in captivity, you'll notice are always in really bad condition. This is from years of standing in very unhygienic conditions, as well as on flooring that is completely inappropriate for their feet. So the Wildlife SOS veterinarian touches a particularly sore spot on her foot, an abscess between her toenails, and she winces and lifts him up with her trunk. It's amazing if you think about it. See, this is an animal with 40,000 muscles running through her trunk. She is casually picking watermelons out of my hand and shattering them in her mouth, sending juice flying everywhere. She could crush a car in a minute, let alone a less than average-sized human being, but she is so gentle with us. It's amazing, but it's also sad, because years of experience have taught her that humans are a species not to be trusted. They're a species to be feared. You can see the bull hook that has been used to train her, and it's casually hanging on a fence. And it pains me to think of the number of times it's been used on her and how. On to happier things. This is the Wildlife SOS elephant ambulance. Emblazoned on its side is the elephant that inspired its creation. This is Lakshmi, and we call her our square elephant. She's morbidly obese after years of begging on the streets of Mumbai and being fed more than 200 vada pav every day. She was so obese when we rescued her that she could no longer stand, that we had to crane lift her onto the truck because we didn't have a ramp for her to walk up. In fact, for the entire journey, Lakshmi tried to use her trunk to drive the car herself because she obviously thought she could do a better job than the truck driver. Lakshmi's rescue inspired us to create what we like to think of as the ultimate elephant rescue vehicle. This is Wildlife SOS's elephant ambulance, and it's the first and only one of its kind in the country. It's fully equipped with everything from a hydraulic ramp to water pumps and shower heads for the elephant, as well as a keeper's cabin that allows direct access to the animal in a way that is safe and comfortable for both the animal as well as the keepers. It also has ports on the sides that allow for drainage and putting in fodder. And so obviously this was our natural choice of vehicle for the journey we were about to undertake. Which is how on 15th of April 2016, we found ourselves departing from Sandavassal in Tamil Nadu with Rhea loaded up on the back of the ambulance. Also on board was a team of 1 veterinarian, 2 keepers, 3 drivers, and myself. Also on board was this man. His name is Amirul Ali, and he had been Rhea's keeper for the entirety of her life. It might seem counterintuitive to say that we take along the very people that have abused these elephants for their entire lives. But what we learned with the Kalandar program when we rescued the dancing bears was that you can't rescue the animals if you don't rescue the people. And so we decided that just like Rhea was now part of the family, so was Amirul Ali, and he was coming along for the journey. Easier said than done, because Amirul Ali is deaf as a doorknob, And so everything we said to him had to be shouted at the same raised decibel with which he gave the simplest instructions to his elephant. But he was coming along for the journey. Our first pit stop comes 1,700 kilometers from the rescue center in Mathura, in Andhra Pradesh, where a spot of unprecedented car trouble, or ambulance trouble as the case may be, forces us to stop on a highway with an elephant loaded in the back of our vehicle. And so we find ourselves, stranded on the highway, but we're lucky because our drivers and my team are as resourceful as they are efficient, and we find ourselves using the ankush, that's the bull hook, as a lever. This is the last time the bull hook will ever be used. And it's finally being used to help an elephant rather than to hurt her. Our next stop comes 1,070 kilometers from the Elephant Conservation and Care Center, when we stop to load up fodder for our elephant on the journey. Of course, this gets a lot of attention from local cattle as well as local people. And we use the opportunity to talk to people about why elephants are important, why we do what we do, and why every time they pay to watch an elephant in a circus or ride an elephant, they're contributing to an industry that abuses and exploits these animals. This is one of the keystones of what Wildlife SOS does, because awareness is what brings about change. And every state that Wildlife SOS works in also runs active programs for awareness for local communities, for affected people, for law enforcement and the government, as well as for the children that will one day make the decisions that affect the lives of the animals we are now trying to save. Our next stop comes in Nagpur, where we stop to buy fruit for our elephant. Of course, when you give them figures like, I want 20 watermelons, 30 papaya, and all the mangoes in your shop, it's bound to get you some curiosity. The heartwarming part is when you tell them why we're rescuing an elephant, generosity seems to come equally fast. And so we find ourselves overloaded with fruit for the journey. And every fruit that Rhea eats seems like a small token of apology on behalf of the members of our species that have hurt her. Our next stop comes in Madhya Pradesh, and generosity seems to have overflowed into the next state as well. And a rather sweet dhaba owner offers us the chance to step out of the truck, give Rhea a chance to stretch her legs, and get a good hosing down. But Rhea seems scared of the amount of space around her. We realize she's probably never felt soft mud under her feet. She's never seen so much space or had the chance to roam around in it unrestricted by chains. And so she picks a single tree at the center of the field and decides she's not going to venture any further. We're all right with this, so as she picks a snack off the tree, so do we. Then the most amazing thing happens. She goes to sleep. It's impossible to describe, but I'm going to try. An elephant sleeping is the most beautiful thing you could ever imagine. It's like this giant mountain of an animal that collapses to the ground and goes on humming like a river, and it exudes the most powerful and most serene sense of calm. And this sense of calm ultimately pervades the entire team, which then falls asleep right near my snoozing elephant. To me, this is the most perfect, most beautiful moment on the rescue. It's just this big bubble of trust, this rescue team that is just exhausted after hours on the road, after days on the road, and this elephant exhausted after God only knows how many years on her feet. And they've fallen asleep together under the shade of a giant peepal tree. If this isn't nirvana, I don't know what is. Of course, I have to play devil's advocate and eventually wake everyone up and tell them that we need to get moving again. Our next and final stop comes just 47 kilometers from our destination when everyone's desperate for a cup of chai. But when we come back from this cup of chai, we find Rhea with a guilty, almost sheepish look on her face. It's an expression that I thought was reserved only for my pet dog when he steals my socks. But keeping this in mind, one of the keepers holds out his hand and she drops into his palm one of the shower heads from our truck that she has broken off. She's easily forgiven for the damage. The elephants are naturally curious animals. They have brains so complex that it allows them to reason and feel in ways that are completely incomprehensible to human beings. They can feel love, they can understand family, they understand loyalty, they understand trust, and they understand the betrayal of all of these as well. The greatest injustice that we as human beings have paid to elephants is a willful ignorance, a complete neglect of their mental and emotional capabilities. We refuse to acknowledge the extent of the suffering we put them through when we tear apart their families, when we beat them into submission, and when we demean their intelligence by making them perform for our entertainment. We drive through the night to finally bring Rhea home to the Elephant Conservation and Care Center. As the truck drives into her new home, her trunk pops up above the carrier and swivels around like a rather curious snorkel. Two of our elephants are grazing nearby, and in perfect timing, both their trunks go up as well. This is the part of the story that I left out. These two elephants are Mia and Sita. And for more than 50 years, they stood by Rhea in the circus. They were performing elephants just like her, and alongside her, they suffered, they performed, and they supported each other. They aren't related by blood, but in every other way, they're family. And they're about to be reunited after more than 6 months apart, after the circus's attempts to sell Rhea to a temple stopped us from getting the last bit of paperwork that we needed to rescue her along with her sisters. As Rhea steps off the ambulance, she becomes the 8th circus elephant to be rescued since Wildlife Sos' inception of the Circus Elephant Rescue Campaign in 2014, leaving just 59 circus elephants left in circuses across India. It seems like a large number, maybe even an impossible number, but if we could rescue more than 600 dancing bears, we can probably do this too. Rhea's first reaction on seeing her sisters is to hold out a bushel of fodder, almost as if a welcoming home gift. When they approach each other, it's absolutely beautiful. There's rumbling, there's leaning against each other, there's linking trunks, there's squeaking on Rhea's part, there's just touching each other, smelling each other, feeling each other, almost as if Mia and Sita are reassuring her that she's finally home, that she's finally in a better place, and that she's finally safe. From here on out, it's good things for her, because the Elephant Conservation and Care Center doesn't just have her sisters, it also comes equipped with everything you need to keep an elephant happy. It comes with lots of space to roam, other elephants to interact with. It comes with excellent veterinary care, and pools to relax in for a little exercise or just some downtime. For Rhea, it also comes with nutritious fodder, lots of food, and a family. There's one part of the story, of course, that's the missing link. Amirul Ali, remember him? It gives me so much joy to tell you that less than 6 months after Rhea's rescue, we were able to take Amirul Ali to a doctor and get fitted with a hearing aid. Now, he can't just hear us, he can also hear his elephant. He can be part of all her awkward, squeaking, one-sided conversations, and he can be part of her rescue journey and recovery. This has been one of the most fantastic experiences of my life, being able to be a part of the change rather than the part of the problem. And that's something I hope all of you want to do as well. Thank you.